It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Eitan Shamir, who currently serves as the Managing Director of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. Additionally, he holds the position of head of the MA program in Security and Strategy within the Political Studies Department of Bar-Ilan University. Before pursuing an academic career, Dr. Shamir was the head of the National Security Doctrine Department at the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in the Prime Minister's office. Prior to his government service, he worked as a senior researcher at the Dado Center for Interdisciplinary Military Studies at the IDF General Headquarters. His research interests and publications span various themes, including military strategy, innovation, and national security. Noteworthy works include Transforming Command, the Pursuit of Mission Command in the US, UK, and Israeli armies with Stanford University Press, Insurgencies and Counterinsurgencies, National Styles and Strategic Cultures with Cambridge University Press, and The Art of Military Innovation with Harvard University Press. Professor Shamir's upcoming publication, slated for release in the fall of 2025, is of particular interest to the Mackinder Forum. The title is Moshe Dayan, The Making of a Strategist, to be published by Cambridge University Press. Professor Shamir earned his PhD from the Department of War Studies at King's College London. And with that, please begin, Professor Shamir.
Okay, so first of all, thank you. I understand you can hear me well, right? It's fine. So thank you for having me. It's an honor to speak in this distinguished forum. I also assume that when making this presentation that many of you are very well informed. Well, there might be others who are a bit less informed. So I was trying to cater to both groups in a way. I'll start by saying just a word about the Besa Center. It's a Begin Sadat Center is an Israeli think tank belong to the Bar-Ilan University. You can go to our website. There is a pop-up. You can put your email and you'll get our articles. You just Google Besa Center and it will immediately show up in the results. And if you don't want to put your email, just visit the website and you'll see the updates, articles that we do, events, and mainly the updates. We have a rolling update on the war, which I think is a very good summary of about every 2 weeks. Having said that, things are going so quickly. Today, I got our update from our main analyst, Dr. Ido Heft. Maybe Milo knows him. So I just printed it out, looked at it, and I got it in the morning. He sent it. He worked on it last night. During the night, I woke up and looked at my phone, and there was the headline said that the Assad the rebel forces are on the way to Damascus. And I said, okay, and they are closing in. And I said, okay, it will probably take a few days at least, and went back to sleep. I got up in the morning, 4 hours later, and the headline said, that's the end of the Assad regime. Damascus fell. And of course, I think everyone is focused on this. And immediately I feel like my presentation now is became a bit outdated in a sense, I will share with you another thing. I wrote this book that you mentioned, The Art of Military Innovation, this book, with Edward Luttwak. I'm sure that most of you know his name. He's a brilliant professor, sometimes a bit eccentric. I can give a lecture about how it was to write a book with Edward Luttwak, or I can write a book about writing a book with Edward Luttwak. But I have to say I learned a lot of course, from him. The book came just 3 weeks before 7th of October. Came September 2023. It is about Israeli innovation in the military, Israel's military innovation. And I remember one of the conversation I had with Lutvak a month after, and he said, Eitan, our book is one of the victims of the 7th of October attack, because nobody wanted to hear about it. It was a major blow to the IDF, to the entire security system of Israel. And then he said another thing. He said, Eitan, you will see, it's going to change in a few months. Everyone will think differently. And I think he was correct in many ways. And we saw how things changed. Now, of course, not in the sense of support to Israel. We know the damage to Israel's reputation, all that on the public opinion arena, but from the professional view of the security community, I think the views have changed about Israel's capabilities and what it can do. Of course, that happened with the beginning of the campaign against Hezbollah, and I'll have to go back to that and explain that chapter as well. So I send you the article, I think, because one of the things I wrote this article, not an end game, but a long, not an end state, but a long game, because what I constantly heard from experts from Israel as well, but also from outside Israel, that what's the purpose of this war? One criticism. Another criticism, you're only making tactical victories or tactical gains. Strategically, you're losing all fronts. There's no objectives to this war. And again, the next phrase was, what is the end state? What is your end state? I remember we had 2 months ago, we had a group from think tanks, very prominent think tanks and very senior people for a workshop. And they said the same, they raised the same questions. What's the end state? Again and again and again. So that's why I decided to write this paper, basically trying to explain the Israeli logic in the war, in the campaign, trying to separate it from all the noise, mainly the political noise that's concerning Netanyahu and Netanyahu's survival and so on and so forth. You can disagree with the strategy, you can disagree with the objectives and the way it is conducted, and probably there's, I have my own criticisms of how it was done, and whether there was ways to improve it, that's for sure. But to try to show that there is logic in the madness, okay? There is a way. So to do that, I want to cover, what happened and go back to the roots, go back to the Israeli security doctrine in its roots, go back to its history to understand a little bit where we are today, okay? And I'll try to do it quick as I can. So this is the name. Okay, so just to say again, I know there are a lot of experts here, probably some experts and people who can give me a lecture about some aspects of the conflict. But I would say this, that this conflict, sorry, I don't, Christine, can you switch to the next one. Yeah, okay. So this conflict is very complicated conflict because it's so multidimensional. On the basic of it is like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but there's layers and layers and layers on top of it. Okay, it's religion, it's history, it's culture, it's different groups that have different interests. It has regional states and different organizations. Some are locally and some are transnational, like the Daesh people. There are global interests of the superpowers that were involved in this conflict from day one. Okay, so all this contributes to what I call the protracted, intractable conflict, and a never-ending conflict. Next slide. Now, if you look at this graph, which a colleague of mine, Ido Hech, that I mentioned his name before in our conversation, Leonard, I need to give him credit. He prepared it, and he accumulated. There's nowhere to find this data. He accumulated it himself. There's no book with this data. What you see here, and you don't have to go into don't try to decipher the different lines and all that. I'll explain it to you, okay? Because it's the big picture that matters. Don't get lost in the woods, counting the trees, you know. What you see here is the conflict between 1920 to 2019, 2020. That's where he stopped counting. So it's not including 7th October. And what you see here is the Jewish casualties, okay? And then later in Israel, it's also the Arab, but they are not a big number from the Israeli citizens. So it becomes, when Israel states becomes a state, he counts Israeli civilians and soldiers, but they can be Arab or Druze, never mind, okay? But they're fighting for Israel, or they are Israeli civilians. So these are the casualties. On top of that, you see the number of soldiers that were killed between the wars, operations between the wars, and soldiers that were killed in each war. So you can see the number of civilian casualties that are very high. The red pikes, between 2000 and 2005, it's the second Intifada, for example, where we had many Israeli casualties, civilian casualties, like more than I think the number was around 2,300 or 400, if I'm not mistaken, all together in those years of Israeli civilians that were killed by suicide bombers. You can see the 2,500 number above 73, which is the Yom Kippur War, of course, the October War. What is the conclusion here? The conclusion here that you don't have, from 1920, you don't have even 1 year that there was no a casualty as an outcome of political violence between the sides since 1920. Every year, the conflict kept going, and every year there was also violent clashes every year since then. So it's an ongoing conflict. There's no, if you have pauses, it's not peace, it's pauses, and the conflict, we'll talk about it next, that it transformed and it's reshaped itself, and it looks different from one decade to the other. But in essence, the violence continues. Okay, next slide. So going to the Israeli strategic thinking, I will quote one, the founding father of the nation, one of the founding father of Israel, Ben Gurion. Everybody knows his name. And this is what he said in 1955. He said, after each war we fight, after each war we win, we will face the same problem. If tomorrow we win another war, we will face the threat of a third round, a fourth, and a fifth round. For us, there is no final battle. We can never assume we can deliver such a knockout blow to the enemy that we will not have to fight again. The opposite is true for our neighbors. They can assume that the final battle will come, that someday they can strike Israel to a degree that will eliminate the problem. There will be no longer an Israeli-Arab issue. That's exactly what happened on 7th October, by the way. Next slide. Okay. Moshe Dayan, my favorite figure, whom I wrote a book about, he termed in a very famous article in the end of the 50s, a term or headline, which is oxymoron, basically. It's military operations in time of peace. And he wrote there, and this was a time, you have to remember that physically, there were no physical barriers between Israel and its neighbors. The borders were completely empty, open, like the US border in the south today. Okay, everyone can cross both ways. No barriers. So he said we cannot guard every water pipeline from explosion and every tree from uprooting. We cannot prevent every murder of a worker in an orchard or a family in their beds. But it is in our power to set a high price for our blood, a price that will be too high to pay for the Arab community, the Arab army, or the Arab government. Basically, he was looking at what you know probably as deterrence by punishment. Okay, so that was the idea. And next slide. Based on that, Israel's security doctrine was developed based on these ideas. And there were, of course, other components to it. And the really basic thing, the basic idea is what we call the, what you have in Christianity, you have the Holy Trinity, right? So it's somewhat akin to the Holy Israeli Security Trinity, with three principles: deterrence, early warning, and decision. We try to, first of all, to deter. Israel's goal is to deter. And the idea of deterrence in Israel's security thinking is that deterrence is a commodity with an expiration date. It's not something stable. And once you establish deterrence, the clock is ticking until at some point the deterrence will fail. But you need to sustain it somehow. Now, you want to have deterrence because Israel wants to prevent itself from going into war. Why? Because the price for Israel for war is horrible. Israel is a country that knows what to do in time of peace. And that's why if you look at Israel and the growth of Israel from 48 to the time now, I think if you, by the way, I'm jumping to the end now, I will make a statement that if you're looking at what is success for Israel, is exactly that, the continuous prosperity of the country in terms of demographic, economy, technology, and all that. So every decade that we do better, that's Israel's victory. So war is making Israel paying a very high price. And after the 73 war, there was a term in Israel, the lost decade, because Israel went back or stopped evolving the way it could potentially if there was no war in 73 that Israel paid such a high price. So the idea is to prevent war. And then if the deterrence fails, early warning. That's why Israel has such a huge apparatus of intelligence, and so much is invested in intelligence. And early warning is needed to mobilize the reserve because Israel relies on reserves. And the third element is decision, which means once you go into the war, you should win it very quickly. You win you win this war. Doesn't mean you win the conflict, as Ben-Gurion said, because Israel cannot win the conflict, cannot have one decisive battle that will end the conflict, will not have what we call a Berlin moment that the troops will have the flags on the German Reichstag and the Germans will sign a surrender. It will not happen because of the asymmetry between the sides. So, but if you win decisively, then you convince the other side that it's not worth it, and he will recalculate his moves, and maybe he will be deterred for some period of time. Okay, next slide. Now, next slide, Christian. Okay, yeah, hit it again. You know what? Hit it again. Okay, another distinction we do is the distinction between what we call routine security and fundamental security. Now, in the past, it was very easy to distinguish. Today, one of the issues we have that they are both blurred together and mashed together. Routine means that the day-to-day Israel, as you saw in the graph that I presented, that the day-to-day Israelis are under attack. They will be under attack from guerrilla. They will be under terror attacks. The army will be under constant guerrilla war. The civilians will be under terror attack. And of course, this also has a price. And Israel will have to fight it all the time. What you see in the series Fauda is part of this, what we call routine security. Fundamental security is a threat that is big enough to threat the existence of the nation. Another way to say it is we call it the basic threat. And that's usually it was referred to the big state armies that were marching into, invading, or the threat of invasion over Israel. In fact, that both routine and fundamental are a risk, pose a very high risk to the nation, because also in the 50s, when we had like infiltration of what we had then, the Fidains, which were the armed groups, like Hamas today, nothing is new, used to infiltrate and kill and burn and rape and so on with Israeli villages on the border areas where people would leave the border area. They would vacate them. So that's gradually people say, we don't want to continue to live in a country where we don't have security for ourselves and our children. We don't want to live in a place where you go up, if it was the second Intifada, you catch the bus and the bus explodes. So people are leaving. And that can become also a threat to the country. Next slide. Okay, so in 1979, I think when I'm asked what are the biggest strategic achievements, diplomatic and strategic achievements of Israel ever, I say the first one, of course, is the declaration of the independence and the following the independence war and the victory and securing Israel. The second one, I think, is 1979, signing the peace treaty with Egypt. After 25 years of wars, headed coalition was led by Egypt. The Egyptians decided that, and you're all familiar with the events. The Egyptians decided that it's not worth it. They have their own other interest. They have a leader who understood it and was willing to take the risk. He paid with his life for that. The same time period when they signed it, this what was a turning event in Israeli geostrategic situation. At the same time, there was the revolution in Iran and Tehran. Of course, nobody paid any notice. Nobody understood the implication then. You read the memoirs, they couldn't see it, what it will mean, but of course it had like grave implication. Next slide. So the way everyone saw in Israel, the leaders of Israel's security community, from the 50s to the end of the 80s, the way they saw the world is this map. An Arab world, Arab-Muslim world around Israel. Israel is isolated, 22 Arab countries that are hostile to Israel, and tiny Israel is fighting with them. And then when Egypt made peace with Israel, it opened the door for slower other countries either to join in, or at least not to consider an attack with Israel, because they could not do it alone without the help of Egypt. Next slide. Now you have to do a few enters because I don't want to wait until all this. So it's just enter until everything will show up. Yeah. Okay. So this is not my slide. This is a slide I took from the IDF. Okay. This is how they show the threat. I think there's maybe another hit you can do. Maybe another one. See if it doesn't disappear. If not, okay. Yeah. So this is the new world that Israel is facing. And this new world is, you can see in the bluish, I don't know what color it is, like the moderate, pro or leaning Western countries, Sunni countries. And there is Iran, and there is the proxies of Iran, and the details of the different threats that these proxies are posing at Israel. Of course, since this, I was just telling you that this map is, as we speak, is changing in Syria. Of course, things are changing, and also Lebanon is not the same. So things are really this. I took this slide 3 or 4 months ago from the IDF, and already it has changed. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this is another slide how they show the threat, especially during after the 7th of October. You can see the attacks coming from Iranian proxies and Iran, of course, but also Yemen, Gaza, and Lebanon. Okay, next slide. Okay, again, hit again. Okay, so I want to start with Gaza, talk a little bit about the 7th of October attack. This is a timeline of Gaza. I think you can hit another one. Hit another one, hit another one, hit another one. Okay, this is a timeline. No, just, okay, go again. This is a timeline of Gaza. Just, again, I'm sure you all know the history of Gaza, but just to have it in front of our eyes, what is important here that okay, 67, it was occupied by Israel. By the way, just an anecdote, maybe as a prelude for the lecture on Dayan. Dayan in 67 gives an order to the IDF not to conquer Gaza. He didn't want to take Gaza at all. He understood the trouble that Gaza is going to bring with it. But the IDF defied its order as the heat of the battle started, and they just, they stormed the strip in one day, and the Egyptian governor surrendered, and that's how Gaza became part of the what is called the occupied territories in 67. 2005, following the Intifada, Arik Sharon decides to the disengagement, the famous disengagement, evacuates 8,000 Jews who are living in Gaza, evacuates all the military that is there, leaving some greenhouses to the residents, hoping that they will go and do some, become busy with agriculture and fishing, and maybe tourism, because Gaza has a wonderful coast. But of course, we know what happened. Hamas wins the election, it kills around 130 PA officers, throw them from the roof, do like horrible things to them. So they make sure that the Palestinian Authority doesn't exist in Gaza. And following this, both, by the way, and I will say it very loudly, both Israel and Egypt, they closed their border crossing, not only Israel. Of course, Israel is still held accountable because Israel was the last occupier, and some of the, well, when I'm talking to lawyers, they're saying, look, it's a controversial legal question whether Israel was still occupier after the disengagement or not. You can make both sides arguments, but of course, those who don't like Israel will always say that Israel is still occupier, never mind the disengagement. So following that, we see a string of operation, and I just highlight the most important ones. There is a cycle of always of Hamas is shooting more and more rockets. That's at a certain point, Israel responds, and then Israel responds in a big operation to restore deterrence, what we call restore deterrence. And then there is a quiet for a few years, and then it starts again. And that's what happened in during this decade. Okay. Now I will point out to two operations. The last one, 2019, Black Belt was only targeting Islamic Jihad by the IDF, and Hamas was sitting on the fence. And that was reinforcing the idea in the IDF and the intelligence community that Hamas doesn't want to get involved. Is not looking for a fight. Okay, that was very, very clever move by Sinwar. And then you have Operation Guardian of the Wall in 2021. where the IDF supposedly declared that it was able to blow up Hamas deep tunnels, what we call the metro, and created a huge damage to Hamas. Today we understand it was all, I don't want to say nonsense, but it was very inaccurate. Okay, so the IDF was boasting about operational success that was way beyond what was really achieved. It didn't put such a big impression on Hamas as the IDF believed. Okay, next slide. Okay. So 6:10. I don't know if you heard, Leonard. Have you heard? Now go back one slide. I don't know, Leonard. Have you heard an Israeli already talking about 7th October? I don't know. I don't want to repeat some of the main themes. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Please go ahead. Please.
Okay. 6:29. I'll just go a bit personal, okay? Where it caught me, I was my daughter, who just finished her army service, and all her friends was in the military. We live in Modi'in, which is just between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It's about an hour drive from the beginning of the Strip of Gaza. And my daughter woke me up. She said she was sitting in a bar. It was Friday night, so she was sitting in a bar with her friends, like young people do all over the world. All her friends were serving in the military. Some of them were paratroopers, special units, and so on. She already finished her military service, and they got messages already during the evening, during the night, that they have to report to their posts. And 6:29, the barrage of rockets started, and my daughter woke me up, and a few minutes after that, and screamed at me that there is a war, there is a war, there is a war. And I told her, like everyone else believed, that well, maybe there are a few rockets that Hamas is shooting, but you're just hysterical. There's nothing going on. I wanted to go back to sleep. And of course, then we had sirens. And after we finished, the sirens ended, we opened the TV, and then the stream of videos started to catch up with us, and we started to realize that there's something else happening here. Of course, in the picture here, you see the famous bulldozer that was disconnecting the fence that was created to as a barrier between Gaza and Israel. The fence, and here, we refer you to the Maginot Line and other defenses. The fence was mostly, Israel found two solutions to two main problems, which was great solution. One is the Iron Dome to the projectile of Hamas, which allowed some normalcy and some protection to the Israelis who are under barrage of rockets. And the underground of this fence is an iron wall that doesn't allow tunnels to cross. So there's no no offensive tunnels between Israel and Gaza. They cannot create it. One thing that the very smart people who made it, they didn't think about it, that if you close the door, if you close the window, they will come from the main door. Okay, and that's what they did. They just came from the main door. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the different videos you see of the attacks in the 7th of October, the kidnapping. You can see here Noah Argamani that was rescued since, but her boyfriend is still being held. The dashboard camera, Kibbutz Be'eri was burned. Some big part of the kibbutz was burned as a result of the fighting. I will say this, and this is outside maybe the scope of really the core professional talk. I hear a lot of some of the propaganda. They're saying because this is the result of the very hard fighting in the urban area, like there is a hard fighting now in Gaza. And of course, they say, those who are Hamas apologists, that most of the civilians that were killed by crossfiring, or even IDF using gunships and tanks. But I tell them, look at Nir Oz. Nir Oz was a kibbutz that the IDF never arrived there. This was what would have happened to all the kibbutzim if the IDF would not have arrived, because the IDF never arrived. When the IDF arrived, the last Gazans left already the kibbutz. They finished their business. It was like a Viking raid from the 8th century, Vikings coming into a town, looting, raping, killing, taking captives, and moving on. That's it. And then putting the place on fire and moving on. And that's Nir Oz. That's the story of Nir Oz, a kibbutz in Israel. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, trying to explain what happened. Very briefly, I would say that it's two things that happened are a complete failure of understanding of intent, of what Hamas is up to. And big part of it was Sinwar, very brilliant deception plan. I mean, Sinwar is a leader that should be studied, okay? I always equate him with Arminius, the guy who did the big defeat in the Black Forest, the Roman, the Varus disaster, where the legions were completely encircled by the Germans, and he lived among the Romans in his young age as a hostage. He was taken as a German prince to live as the Germans did, as they did with King Herod's sons. And he learned the Roman way, and he knew how to fight them. Therefore, he was ready to plan the big ambush. And Sinwar was in many ways like this. He spoke Hebrew, he read media, he understood, or at least he thought he understood Israeli society. He spent many years in jail, in Israeli jail, and he did a degree, university degree in Hebrew there. So he really studied us. He did it. He did the famous principle of know your enemy. He knew well. So he made this deception plan, and he knew what Israelis are looking for is quiet, and what Israelis are looking for is for Hamas to become pragmatic, and Hamas to become a political player, and he played to this idea. The other thing is capabilities. This was, again, the fallacy of 73 war, underestimation, what the other side can do. Very, very simple. And I can go on and on about it, but I'll just say the plans we knew the plans. We saw their training, the training camp. We saw what are the training scenarios, how they're training to take a military post, how they're training to take a civilian settlement, kibbutz. We saw it, and we had the plans also in writing, like we had the plans of the Egyptians, but nobody in the intelligence understood that this is something that they are taking seriously. They are going to do it, and also there was a strong belief that they are not there yet. They're still, they're training, but they're very far away from actually, delivering, on it, actually being able to do it. Okay, next slide. This is a picture I'm using a lot. In the end of 2014, Sinwar took a photo posing in this way on his couch. What you see behind him is the rubble of his office, of his chambers, and he's smiling, and he has this nice clothes, and he's actually, this is a face of defiance. Basically, his message is, look, you can bomb my office. I don't care. I will be the last man standing and laughing. Okay, and there will be a next round. So what was Hamas strategic calculus? What was Hamas really? Because part of the Israeli, I think, overconfidence was that simply put, Hamas is much weaker than Israel. And obviously, if Hamas will try to do something like this, it will have disastrous consequences. Okay? So why would you do it? So of course you're not going to do it, because this is what a rational person will do. He will not go and do this. So I don't have, of course, an answer from the documents. I don't have a recording of discussion of Sinwar with his lieutenants and what did they say. But I believe, and this is again an assumption, it's my estimation, and talking to a lot of people, many agree that he had like a worst case scenario and a best case scenario. Best case scenario is that Israel everyone will join him, West Bank, Israeli Arabs, like they did in 2021, when we had riots of Arabs on the streets, of Israeli citizens, Israeli Arab citizens. Of course, Hezbollah, of course, the other proxies, as we saw them, but they will immediately join up, and Israel will fall. It will bring Israel to its end. This best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that nobody will join him, or whoever will join him, halfway, not fully committed, and Israel will recover, but he will have the hostages. He will retreat. Israel will attack, and Israel will have to stop after killing 5,000 Palestinians, because there will be international pressure. A, B, he has the hostages, so Israel will have to stop. He will negotiate, and in the end, he will emerge as the victorious, daring leader that led this huge raid on Israel, made it pay the huge price, and brought Israel to its knees in terms of the negotiation, and he will show everyone how to do it. Okay, that's what I believe. Okay, next slide. Okay, that's Hamas charter, which I think inspired all this, because it's I just had someone in my center who wrote a book about Hamas. He's a long-time researcher in the Israeli intelligence. We sent it to a big publisher. We sent it to reviews, and we got 2 reviews of saying, "Oh, Hamas charter has no significance. It's all the other document that they since published, that they are very pragmatic, and they are willing to accept on some terms the existence of Israel." And yeah, I know that there's some people who believe this, not me. I think that the charter is really what represents the core belief of Hamas, and they are committed to it. We saw it's not only killing Jews; it is a Nazi-like document, but we saw the expression of this in Gaza. Every educational book that the IDF found, the math was like the math problems are: if you kill 3 Israeli soldiers and you capture 2 Israeli other soldiers, and then you capture and kill other, how many did you kill and how many, and subtract the injured, and this is the kind of things that they teach. So we take it very seriously. And what is written here, that the stone will scream that the Jew is hiding behind the rock and the tree will scream, the Jew is behind me, come and kill him. Basically, what it means is that nature itself cannot stand the Jews. It's so basic to how the world operates, that the world have to to eliminate the Jews. Nature itself. Okay, next thing. This is a capture of Hamas doctrine, not from the current campaign, but from 2014. And you can see in this translated doctrine that they say, look, civilians, this is our advantage. We will hide behind civilians. The enemy will have a problem of opening fire. If it will open fire, it will be under international criticism. So we win either way. Either it will not be able to open fire, or it will increase international, of course, international pressure, and also our civilians. And this is what we want. We want to bring more hatred to Israel. So this is exactly what it will create. So using civilians as a shield is part of the doctrine. Very much the basic of the Hamas doctrine. Next one. Okay, so Hamas arrives, very well executing the plan. At the time, there is like around the Gaza border 2 battalions. About half of their manpower is at home on leave. The other don't have any alert, so they are sleeping in their beds. 12 tanks, only 12 tanks, isolated tanks are around the strip. Hamas is using those quadr propellers to drop RPG on the soft skin of the tank. It's using gliders. It comes very well equipped. All this explosive. Next slide. I'll go very quickly on that, but what it says here that Hamas, you look at the plan and they had a very good analysis. They did a very good analysis of all the weak points of the Israeli defensive. So they had a very good intelligence of where to attack and how to attack. Next slide. It's running a bit quickly because I see time is the clock is running. Hamas is inspired by the plan from 3 sources that we can observe. One is Hezbollah, the way it is organized, the way it is planning the attack. It's very similar to the plan of Hezbollah that was preparing way before Hamas. By the way, the time, I didn't say the time Hamas was planning and preparing, it was about 2 to 3 years, we know. So very, very similar, taking a page out of Hezbollah's plan to attack in the north, the famous Radwan forces of Hezbollah. Now, another source of inspiration is ISIS, and that's where we saw the pickup trucks, the motorcycle, so quickly to penetrate quickly, surprise, shock, and to run all the way into the death and the rear of your adversary. So that's a page taken from ISIS. And the third source of inspiration and learning is the Russia-Ukraine war. That's where they learned the use of the quadcopters, the drones, how to use it in various ways, and they are taking a page out of this war. Go ahead. Okay, so you can see all the things that actually brought the Gaza division to collapse, and basically there was no command and control after the attack, the Hamas attack. The whole command and control system collapsed in the Gaza area because they took over the division headquarters, and very naively the IDF created against the basic military doctrine of every military in the world, the brigade headquarters very close to the division. Again, because they never thought of a scenario that can happen like this. So they took all at once, and their main attacks were, first of all, to the power centers of the IDF, and only then they went to the civilian. All in all, the estimation on the first hour, there's about 3,000 Nukhba, mostly forces that are crossing the border, flooding the area, and the next 2 hours, another 2,000 to 3,000. Half of them are looters already that are coming to loot and just opportunists. Next slide. Okay, so this is just an aerial map. Next slide, just to see the distances and where is Gaza. You can see the link. It is a remarkable work of a site that allows you to zoom in to each area, and you can locate every person, to see every person that was killed or kidnapped. Where did it happen? How did it happen? Who is the person? And so on. And you can play with the map. It's like three-dimensional. It's very nice, very nicely done. It's a big project, but you can see also where the penetration of the Hamas, where did it happen? Where the main combat areas or the main massacres, and how deep did they arrive? You can see here, this is Ofakim. This is the further place they came in Israel. They actually meant to go further into both towards Dimona in the south and also towards Tel Aviv, but they were stopped by roadblocks already. They were stopped by roadblocks and they were intercepted. The numbers, by the way, and this is why it's so hard to believe the Hamas numbers. If you remember the first week after the war, there was an announcement, official figure of 1,400, and then it dropped. And because even though Israel already had control of the territory, it was so difficult to some of the bodies were burned. Some bodies of the terrorists were mistakenly identified as Israelis, and vice versa. It was such a confusion. So it took sometimes some weeks to get to accurate numbers. And I say, how come, which is a question I raise, how come the Hamas knows exactly, the number of casualties that they have when they have areas that they don't have control of? They don't know who is buried under the rubble. They have not taken out the rubble, yet they consistently very precise about their numbers. They know exactly. By the way, according to their figures, there are no even one Hamas that was killed. It was 40 something Palestinians. That's it. No distinction between civilians and Hamas. But we can speak maybe in the Q&A about the casualties. Okay, go ahead. Here, this is Ofakim. You can see the areas where it's another map that shows you the area where Hamas was attacking. Go ahead. I don't want to. Okay, so by the 10th of October, Israel regained full control. So the 3 days of fighting in Israel's territory, you can say that 3 days Hamas was controlling parts of Israeli territory, following mobilization of 360,000 reserves. And many of them went to the north, by the way. They were sent to the north because the fear was that Hezbollah is going to join in. And the bombing campaign began and calls for population evacuation. Go ahead. We'll try to run faster here. Official goals of the war. So there were official goals of the war that were stated by the cabinet is A, to dismantle Hamas military and governmental capabilities. I will already say that I think we did the first part. Hamas doesn't have military capabilities anymore. And usually the answer I get, yes, but there are Hamas are still fighting in Gaza, and yes, but this is not military capabilities. This is guerrilla warfare. There are groups, small groups here and there, running wild around with Kalashnikovs. They have RPGs. It creates damage. It kills every now and then Israeli soldiers, injured a few, but they don't have military capabilities to pose a threat, a strategic threat on Israel. After the assassination of Haniya, the Hamas response was 2 rockets. One fell to the sea, one fell on Gaza. For a very long time, and this I know that the Israeli intelligence knew where Hamas leadership is before 7th of October, but were reluctant to act to try to assassinate them because they were afraid that follow this assassination, Hamas will shoot so many rockets and it will disrupt Israeli life and Israeli economy and so on and so forth. They reached the airport, they reached Tel Aviv. So they kept postponing it. Every time there was an opportunity, they kept postponing it. Of course, you postpone the problem, it only shows up, as every dentist will say to you, only will show up in a more severe situation. Create the conditions of the release of the kidnapped. Maybe we are reaching it now. We'll see. To return the displaced citizens to their homes, and overall strengthening Israeli deterrence and restore the security feeling. That's kind of an overarching objective. These are the declared objectives. What I wrote in the article, and I think I have more slides, but I think I'll stop here, so I'll answer. I will have time to answer questions. What I wrote in the article is that there is also undeclared objectives, and that, Israel was in shock at the beginning, but it started slowly to evolve during the war in Gaza, and to understand what's going on, to comprehend what's going on. It was understood that the main war is not with Hamas, that the main war is with Iran, that we're going back to focus on Iran. So the overarching, the informal objective became really destroying the Iranian proxies on Israel's border. And just now, Netanyahu, after the ceasefire agreement in the north, he said that now, when he made a speech to the public, he said, now we can focus on Iran. Now Iran is on our focus because we have Hezbollah. We have, of course, again, we have to talk about the implication in Syria, but it's another factor. But I don't think it will change. It changes much. On the contrary, actually. So that's the Israeli war objective. Now I will say one more thing. Many ask, and I didn't have time to go into my next slides were on the Israeli operation in Gaza, on the campaign in Gaza. But many ask, how you explain this discrepancy between the gap between the horrible failure in the south and what happened in the horrible failure of the intelligence in the south, and what happened it's like two different militaries were operating on two different fronts. And now the answer is very telling and very simple, but very telling. And it's nothing new, of course. The IDF did not believe, and when I say the IDF, it's also the entire security community and the intelligence community. Okay, the Shabak, the Mossad, they did not believe that they will ever have to go into Gaza, to invade with ground forces into Gaza. They had no plans to go into it. They had to begin everything from scratch. For a very long time, they also had, for various reasons, they have neglected the intelligence in Gaza, mainly UMIT intelligence, very weak. But they said, okay, Hamas is a weak opponent. We have it under control. It's a weak opponent. And for at least from 2006, the focus was Hezbollah. Hezbollah was the strong opponent. Hezbollah was capable. People felt that Hezbollah can do a lot of damage, and the IDF was completely focused on Hezbollah. So when the time came, it knew what to do. It knew what to do, and it had a plan, as they say, and it executed the plan very well. So that's the main difference. I will also add that it was amazing for me. I was in a discussion. I was invited to discuss with some British policy advisor, sitting close to they wanted to understand what's going on. They invited me and another 4 or 5 people from UK and the US, experts on the Middle East, or military experts, and asking what's going on. And everyone said, well, there were a few people from Arab countries, also descended from Arab countries, but living in those countries, in the UK and US. And they said what they said, and I said to the British, I said, look, we're going. I have just one thing to tell you. You tell your government that Israel is going to finish in Gaza and going to start in the north. And then I remember the reaction was like, wait, and he made everyone silence their microphones and said, I want to hear Eitan again. I didn't hear you well. You're sure? I want to hear you say it again. And I said, there is going to be 100% an Israeli operation in the north. We are going to act on Hezbollah. Hezbollah is going to pay. And tell this to your government. And he was said, sure, how come? And everyone was on me, all the other experts, explaining to me that first, Israel cannot do it, is not able to do it. If it will try to do it, it will fail. It doesn't have the guts to do it. There's no way that you can push Hezbollah out of South Lebanon because they are part of, they are embedded in this population, so on and so on. So you cannot touch Hezbollah, they are invincible, and so on and so on and so forth. But that's just, so I will end here. There's so much, of course, to discuss and to talk about, but I hope I clarified this, a little bit some of the issues. And thank you for listening. I'm ready to take your questions.